Is it actually harder to make it as a male VTuber? Well, I guess that depends on what exactly you mean by make it. Let's talk about that. There's a lot of talk in the VTuber world about the prospects for growth and popularity vis-a-vis male VTubers, and the notion that they work at some inherent disadvantage versus the majority of female VTubers. I want to share my observations, theories, and unbidden ejaculations. As a male VTuber who is currently tiny and likely to remain so for the foreseeable future, I thought I would opine on my experience growing from square zero. Stick around, because I'm gonna go deep analysis mode on the oft-observed gap in followership of Holostars versus Hololive. And in no way is this predicated on some Melvillian quest for search engine optimization to help my metrics in other areas. Okay, some of this idea may have been honed by that motive, but I've been wanting to talk about being a tiny guy for a while. Plus, it's tiny guy talk from someone who isn't yet a big guy, so you know I'm a credible source of journalistic semiotics. And hopefully this is helpful to other tinies out there. Also, with luck, maybe this will be some kind of a neat time capsule in the future when I'm sipping from a crystal chalice in the back of a VTuber limo marked financial solvency. Anyway, on with the video essay. Why the disparity? One thing that makes the whole male VTuber discussion such a tough nut to crack, single entendre, is the fact that any discussion about growth or growth potential or what it takes to succeed as a content creator is automatically tied up in a million competing factors that nobody can clearly enumerate. I mean, why are any VTubers bigger than others? Is there a formula? Does the collective unconscious play into this? Now, much of the complaining you may have seen online about bigger accounts is just rooted in bitterness, I'll admit. Bitter root, like dandelions. Is there any merit to the idea that being a woman, even if you're going about it Babi Niku style, gives you an inherent advantage as a VTuber? A quandary simply stated. People do like booba, but people also like not booba? Oh no, this is so much complicated. Now, I tend to dismiss the idea that gender plays the most important role or even a particularly important role in the success or failure of one's output. Still, for every male VTuber I can name off the top of my head, I can name about a dozen female VTubers. And I know there are plenty of big male VTuber channels out there. Agency guys like Kuzuha and Kanae, a bunch of indie guys like Pappy the Lich King, Randon, Isekai, Cabal, Woohoolat, VCounts, Nux Taku. That guy has more money sealed away in YouTube's money jail than I'll ever possess in my whole life. Well, the first question, are there simply in fact more female VTubers than male ones? That alone might account for why I seem to hear of so many more of them. But then, why? Part of it, I assume, might be the added layers of anonymity that come with a virtual realm appeal to a greater number of women than men for various reasons.
Yeah, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of pressure, it's very scary at times.
After all, there are a ton of big, non-virtual male content creators of all stripes. I also think that part of it may simply be demographic. Many of the women who get into VTubing seem to be coming into it from some prior training or experience with a skill that's relevant to entertainment. Iron Mouse is a trained opera singer. Did you know that? Notably, many of the men I listed above have a background like that too. But I suspect many men who decide to get into VTubing or streaming in general come into it from watching streams. As such, there's going to be a lot more inexperienced beginners in that cohort trying to get their land legs in the merciless world of content creation. Well, hell, myself included. This might partially account for the perception that more women than men seem to hit the ground running, if that perception is actually numerically accurate. I'm not even sure. As people new to the rabbit hole approach crush depth, a question they often have is, paraphrased, why Holostar know as many Hololive? It's a fair question and an accurate observation. The disparity is noticeable. Not to say the Holostars are faring poorly by any means. In fact, many of the accounts are barely more than a year and a half old and already have hundreds of thousands of subs. Any way you slice it, that is fantastic growth on YouTube. But the gap between theirs and Hololive's numbers is still staggering. Surely this is proof that there's simply less demand for men. Well, maybe. First of all, Hololive set itself apart from the pack by combining VTubers with idols. I'll admit, I never knew much about idols or idol culture before Hololive, and virtually everything I've learned about it since I learned via Hololive. Cover's whole specialization is in melding two different kinds of unrelated media. That's their unique selling point. Now, I think it's only natural that a target audience made from the overlap of two niche audiences is gonna result in an audience that's somewhat selective and hard to sell on other products, even ones that are very similar to the one they like. I realize this is far from universal, but it's safe to assume that the majority of idol fans are gonna be young, single, presumably straight men. So maybe male idols specifically just have a harder time getting attention from that audience. But this all still sort of assumes that the typical Hololive fan has absolutely no interest in supporting male creators in general, an idea that I find a bit far-fetched. Really, I think the plight of Holostars has more to do with the order in which they're likely to be discovered. It goes like this. Here's a quick overview of a typical trip through the VTuber rabbit hole. You find out about a particular VTuber, probably one of the bigger ones. After ascertaining the nature of the strange and wonderful thing you just discovered, you start to familiarize yourself with their body of work. Then at some point you clue into the fact that there are other VTubers in the same company. Oh, this dog VTuber has a cat VTuber friend, that's cute. And they're part of these things called generations. Okay, what's a generation? So you look and find, oh, holy shit, there's like a dozen other VTubers at this agency. And oh my god, there's like other branches in other entire countries with their own generations. It's around this point that you probably learn that there's a whole parallel agency within the same company that does male VTubers exclusively. From there, you're likely not far from learning that there are other agencies entirely, and then you realize the existence of the entire indie scene. Oh my god! You realize then that it's already too late. The VTubers have taken over the world and they didn't have to fire a single shot. You might as well submit to your new kawaii overlords and become one of them. But did you see what happened there? Holostars are probably rarely discovered in isolation. They just end up coming in with a deluge of information about all 18 million VTubers in the world outside of Hololive. So they kind of can't help but get lost in the shuffle a bit. Plus, by the time your case as a VTuber fan is that terminal, you probably already have a favorite or 2 or 10. Personally, I theorize that Holostars might have grown at a rate more consistent with the rest of the agency if Hololive itself had continued to become more atomized. Holostars exists in this weird limbo state where they're not part of Hololive, but they are, kinda? So why are the Holostars not commonly discovered in isolation? Well, Hololive had the benefit of a handful of viral overseas sensations even from early on. You had Miko and Hachima with some of their unfortunate brushes with virality, Fubuki, who's some kind of a meme-making savant, and Korone with their English challenge streams and frequent, if accidental, meme-worthy moments. And then, of course, Kiryu Koko, who was fully bilingual and did a lot to push for bridging the Japanese and Western markets. And this was the case before there was even an EN branch. Holostars never really had a huge breakout like that. I mean, there was Roberu kind of, with the Winning Sun meme. Yes! And naturally, he's the most widely known Holostar overall. But somewhat more than Hololive, it seems like the Holostars content is a little harder to break into if you're not at least somewhat fluent in Japanese. From early on, Hololive had some big lightning in a bottle moments, and from there they set a lot of precedent for what people expected a VTuber to be like. And it can be hard to break away from that. Look at how even indies have more or less adopted the Hololive vernacular of graduations and debuts and the like. So there you go. I think a big part of the way we discuss male VTubers is some of that Hololive precedent setting the framework for the discussion. Add to that the consequent surge of inexperienced viewers turned content creators, and the result is a general but little examined notion that male VTubers can't be as successful. Now, we haven't really defined success beyond a simple function of follower counts and views, but I think that might be a talk for another time. Meanwhile, let me ask you this. Without looking it up, who are Paul Whiteman and Nikiforos Focus? Biggest dang musician of his time and a successful-ass general who got to be emperor of freaking Rome, that's who. I had to look both of them up and I bet you never heard of either of them either. And if you did, congratulations for being literate or whatever. Must be nice! Point is, if you want this kind of project to do anything for you, it better be something intrinsic. It's natural to want to distinguish yourself in some way, but in light of the merciless expanse of infinity, adjectives like significant and important just don't really mean all that much. At least not for long. I leave you with the following words of wisdom. The boast of heraldry, the pomp of power, and all that beauty, all that wealth there gave, awaits alike the inevitable hour. The paths of glory lead but to the grave. Also, gimme, sub and like for God's sake, engine optimization, the hell out of this video. Promote it, give me stuff of cold pieces I did with my like and subscribe and like this video if you enjoyed this video or you...